The Italian Renaissance represents a time of growth and enlightenment full of magnificent art. During this time, artists and scholars alike were looking back at ancient Greek and Roman works for inspiration and guidance in their classical learning. When observing the early Renaissance and the late Renaissance, the development and changes are quite obvious to observe. As artists moved away from the flat portrayals of humans, the different perspectives of the Middle Ages and Proto-Renaissance began. Lorenzo Giotto, a Florentine painter, is one of the most notable artists of the Proto-Renaissance, which roughly spans from the late 13th century and into the early 14th. He pioneered advances in the technique of representing humans more realistically in art. We can observe this in his painting of Madonna and Child completed in 1310. Compared to medieval art, his work seems to take on a more realistic features, especially in the faces. We also see more models used in the art, especially when we look at the angels, and they all possess their own unique features versus one unified face. Giotto's figures also have more form and figure, making them feel more lifelike. We see the deep shading in the drapery that allows us to clearly define the curves and figure of the bodies. Giotto was also a master at perspective and was one of the first artists to try and develop a more three-dimensional space that allowed the viewer to be more part of the art as they looked in. Giotto masterfully created the painting in a way where the viewer is looking directly at Christ, positioned just a bit below him. The audience is able to see a bit more of the right window, which gives the viewer a feeling of standing on the left side and facing Christ towards him.
We then move on to Gentile da Fabriano, a northern Italian artist who settled in Florence, in his masterpiece, The Adoration of Magi from 1423. Gentile da Fabriano has a style that shows great opulence and wealth in his work. We can see this in the careful detail of the garb of the kings, the golden halos, and details that adorn the painting give it a sort of otherworldly glow. Gentile da Fabriano creates a continuous landscape that allows the story of this painting to work its way down the canvas. In the upper left corner, we can see the beginning of the king's long journey to Christ. We can see the moment when they begin to follow the star. In the center of the arc, there's a portrayal of the three kings entering Jerusalem as they grow closer to their destination. In the upper right corner, we see the kings entering Bethlehem. Finally, the story completes at the center and largest part of the painting, where we see the kings meeting Christ as a child. This form of storytelling is new to the Renaissance and brings more life to the work. As we observe the figures, we see the emotions and deep shading of their life. As we observe the figures, we see the emotions and deep shading of their features and clothing. Artists grow stronger with the portrayal of man, and we see this evolve as we continue to move deeper into the Renaissance. However, we have yet to see the linear perspective that is developed in the Renaissance, but rather all the figures are pushed up in the foreground. This painting was one of the most expensive paintings done during the Renaissance. This shows the economic growth of the Popolo Grasso during that time.
This moves us on to Masaccios' painting of the Holy Trinity done in 1424. Masaccio was a master at perspective, and this particular piece of art lays claim to his skill. This is one of, if not the first examples of true linear perspective in painting. The use of linear perspective allows the artist to create a more realistic space that has depth visible by the viewer. At the center of the painting, we have the Holy Trinity, God the Father, a depth for the Holy Spirit, and finally Christ the Son. Masaccio also created an intensely realistic portrayal of Jesus that totally escapes the old medieval art and defines itself as a true Renaissance masterpiece. This representation is so true to real life that Masaccio would have had to study the human figure and muscles very closely, showing how the Renaissance was a time of marriage between deep faithfulness and scientific observation.
We make our way into the High Renaissance with Leonardo da Vinci's famous piece, The Last Supper, completed in 1495. We further see the use and development of linear perspective in the work. There's different forms of geometry used to create this perfect perspective. For example, Christ's body creates a perfect equilateral triangle, and if you were to draw a circle, he would lie in the center of it. The window behind him also frames Christ and in a way represents the halo that was commonly painted around the Christ figures. With the apostles crowded around the table, there is no open space left between them, space that may have represented the ability for the viewer to become a part of the art as seen in earlier portrayals of the Last Supper. However, Da Vinci creates a completely separate world that is blocked off by the table and closeness of the figures, allowing them to be in their own separate space. Leonardo simplifies the space and focuses on lines and figures of the subjects, really trying to let their emotions and reactions be the center part of the painting. Leonardo created 4 groups of 3 with the apostles that causes them to overlap and make their connections and reactions more realistic and with more drama. This created that unified composition that is part of the High Renaissance. Leonardo masterfully creates a space with depth and drama that draws the audience in while still blocking them out. Through this artwork that we have explored, it is clear that over time, artists have developed masterful techniques that allow for greater display of perspective and more complex human figures. Their skills seem to evolve as the Renaissance progressed from the early to High Renaissance. Paintings from the Renaissance can be explored for years on time, and they often are. But we hope this short video has allowed you to view a small part of how the Renaissance defined itself in art and how art began to take a more complex form with perspective, depth, emotion, and drama. The Renaissance is truly a high point in the history of art, and it is to the credit of amazing artists who opened up their minds to both new and ancient ideas. They blended these ideas perfectly into the Renaissance that we know and love.